Rebel Moon's director's cuts are now available on Netflix. I did not watch the original two films because I had no interest in watching them until I saw all of the reviews coming in stating that these director's cuts are worse than the original films. So my brother and I slogged through the 3.5 hours Rebel Moon Part 1 and still have yet to watch Rebel Moon Part 2. But maybe, just maybe, one is enough? Because damn! Hello my friends and welcome to The Pondering. I am the real life fake wizard. If this video brings you any value at all or you like anything I have to say, please consider subscribing to this channel where we post videos nearly every day. There's a bit of production lore here for Rebel Moon. Zack Snyder originally pitched this to Lucasfilm with the intent of making a Star Wars film series. Lucasfilm said no, and that's funny because Rebel Moon is a blatant ripoff of Episode 4, A New Hope. So Lucasfilm must have been like, nah, we've already cloned that film once. We can't do it a third time. Yet.
I bypassed the compressor.
And so Zack pitches this to Netflix successfully. Netflix is always looking for its next super hit, so when Zack says he wants to make a multi-movie Star Wars, they bent the knee and gave him full creative control. As an aside, anytime a studio comes at a project with the intent to make a ton of movies in a cinematic universe, it fails. Why? Because they're too concerned with making many movies that they don't make a good first movie. The Dark Universe at Universal was supposed to be a Universal Monsterverse, which should have been awesome with the star power that was connected. But that first Mummy movie was awful and didn't do well financially. I think the trailer killed that movie, but that's a talk for another day. The Dark Tower was supposed to be a setup for a Stephen King verse, but flopped. G.I. Joe, King Arthur, Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman all failed after 1 or 2 movies. And then there's the DCEU and Fox Marvel movies, which made a bunch of movies but never saw the success of Disney's Avengers. And I blame that on the creative direction that was non-existent for the DCEU or Fox Marvel movies. Too many moron writers in the pot for both of those properties, and it just wasn't fun. R.I.P. And that brings us back to Rebel Moon, which Zack Snyder has said that he intends to make 6 Rebel Moons. And knowing Zack Snyder, that actually means 12 Rebel Moons. 6 original films and 6 director's cuts, the way it was meant to be seen. That sucks because now this film suffers from the baggage of holding up a 12-movie cinematic universe. So instead of just being a good sci-fi adventure, it now has to set up for 12 movies worth of world building and pantheons and religions and cultures and nonsense. The kind of details that weren't necessary with Episode 4, A New Hope. Details that came more so in Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which was the middle movie prequel and did an insane amount of interesting lore building. Say what you want about The Phantom Menace, that's fine, you could do that. That movie expanded the Star Wars world in fantastic ways. But I digest. Rebel Moon Part 1 overstuffs its narrative and overinflates the runtime. We spend 20s of minutes with characters that get sidelined for things that I hope will come up in later movies, and spend 2s and 3s of minutes with characters that are actually on the Misfit Power Rangers team. So it doesn't feel like you've given us nearly enough time to believe that these Misfit characters would do what they're doing. There's a scene where the Misfits arrive on a planet to recruit some guy Charlie Hunnam just happens to know about. The guy is enslaved. They don't have the money to buy this guy's freedom, so the slave owner makes a bet that the slave dude can accomplish a difficult task, or all the Misfits will be enslaved as well. The Misfits blindly accept this gamble with no talk about the possible consequences. For me, this broke any foundation I had with the movie's believability. We're about an hour and a half in, and the movie has gone through painstaking lengths to include characters talking and going through details we don't really need. Stretched scenes where it's like, we get it, please move on. The kind of details where you could have just said, hey, we're gonna move these boxes, and then cut back to these guys later and show that the boxes have been moved. But instead, we have to watch every single step of moving the boxes, every grunt, every lift, every footstep. So when you have that, And then later on, the misfit heroes are willing to trade their lives on a gamble with a slave dude they've known for actually 6 seconds. I just can't take you seriously anymore. I cannot take you seriously anymore, Zack Snyder. Your movie is ridiculous. I haven't even discussed what the plot is yet, and I almost feel like I don't have to, because there is not one single original idea in this movie at all. Not one. Everything can be tracked back to story beats and special features from Star Wars, Doctor Who, Warhammer, A Bug's Life. Every single sequence of events has been done in other films, just better. Which brings me to a very unique point. When we talk about things like AI and ChatGPT, you know those things are not taking over the world yet, right? Well, why is that? Because AI models learn from itself, and it learns from what we feed into it. So what began as the internet's worth of knowledge, let's say, we start playing with that and telling it to make new things. It's only able to make new things based on that sample set of the internet that it already knows. It's not inventing new ideas, it's restating old ones. At least that's how AI is right now. It's not capable of free thought. It's not capable of free ideas. Well, it's the same thing with movies and media now. The writers and directors we have now aren't dreaming up new things. They're rehashing things they've seen in movies before. Our media is now the same feedback cycle as AI. We're taking what we know from the past and redoing it poorly. And this isn't the argument that Hollywood only wants sequels and remakes because it sells. I actually think that's more of a cop-out now than it was before. This is writers and directors being incapable of creating new things. Everything is a derivative. We look at things like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. That man lived a long and challenging life. He had stories to tell based on that experience. C.S. Lewis lived a long and challenging life. He had stories to tell based on that experience. Our writers and directors today aren't living those types of lives, and maybe that's a good thing in some places. There was a lot of war back then. The only real inspiration they have are from the media they consume. Jeez, look at Rings of Power. Sauron is going to be like Walter White this time. Really? So a TV character based on a well-written book character has been reduced to a derivative of a TV character? How f***ing original. Writers today draw inspiration from the media they consume to make more media, and often self-insert themselves as protagonists to spew their beliefs. Is this always the case? Obviously not. Like, obviously, I know. Yes, there are plenty of great writers and storytellers out there who weren't war veterans, who can tell great stories. Brandon Sanderson is a great example. The Mistborn saga is awesome, and a lot of the other series he's worked on are also very well respected. So Rebel Moon's plot is just a boring derivative of other, better works. But what about its characters? Most of the Misfit team are boring and predictable, except for Bae Doona's nemesis, who is a cyborg with robot hands and the Rebel Moon lightsaber trademark, who I was vaguely interested in. She has this very robotic presentation that screams, predictably, that she suffered awful trauma, which has made her cold and vengeful. I think it was just the way Bae Doona played it off that I was interested. There are these close-up scenes on her face, and she doesn't blink, and her face doesn't move, all while she talks. Seems like a really small thing, right? Yeah, I'm grasping at f***ing straws here, trying to find something redeeming about this movie. Also, Ray Fisher, previously seen as Cyborg in the late, not-so-great Justice League franchise. For some reason, I like the way the guy enunciates, so I kinda wish he got more to do. Then we look at the bad guys. Who are bad guys? How do we know they're bad guys? Well, the movie needs to keep tipping the hat to remind us they are bad every single scene they are in. It's obvious that these guys are supposed to be World War II Yahtzees. The opening 20 minutes is the Yahtzees sacking a planet and noting that 1,000 years of culture has been destroyed because the people disobeyed the Yahtzees. Then traumatizing a kid by making him murder his dad to spare his mom and sisters. But will the Yahtzee boss honor his word and spare the mother and sisters? Obviously not. But the scene drags on and on and on, like we don't know what's about to happen. See, with the Empire in Star Wars, we see that they're respectful men, respectful soldiers. They're bad, but there's a respect that they have, a tone of voice when they're speaking. They're not savages. They're dignified. which is a good reason why I think the Empire has stood as the bad guys for other writers to try to copy for nearly 50 years. Rebel Moon's bad guys are instantly forgettable savage monsters who don't have a single redeeming quality. I'm so sick of bad guys being dark Tetrad levels of bad. Like, oh no, not only are they fascist dictators with nothing redeeming about them, they're also extremely perverted and masochistic too. They're grapists too. You can't like anything about them at all. You can't empathize with them at all because they're pure evil for the sake of being mustache twirly pure evil. It makes me think of the TV miniseries V. An alien species descends from space looking just like humans, but secretly they're reptile hybrids, seeking to turn humans into food. It's a great concept, and we see some of the lizards do not want to blindly follow their imperial leaders. There are many lizards that join up with the humans to fight their own people because they don't blindly follow the leadership. And even the leaders, you can empathize with Diana and the Imperial leaders to understand why these aliens would very much see humans as food. You know, like we see cows and chickens as food, kind of like that. There are layers of emotion to connect with, and that makes it even more satisfying when the humans beat the lizards. There are stakes there. It's emotional when heroes and villains die because you've given us a reason to care. Rebel Moon's final battle is the mummy girl boss beating the crap out of the Yahtzee bad guy boss, and it's emotionless. It's boring. The choreography might be cool, but choreography is meaningless nowadays. Fight choreography is key jangling to fans who just want to watch action figures smashed together. When you haven't given us a reason to care about the characters, how can we take their fighting seriously? Rebel Moon is the kind of movie that plays in the background on the television of good movies. It's visually annoying at times, with entire scenes being out of focus or changing focus frequently. Early on, there are scenes where it gets so dark and so bright so fast, your vision doesn't have time to adjust and it hurts your eyes. One thing I will give it is you can see the budget is clearly spent on screen. These two movies cost $166 million, and we get a solid 7 hours of content. A lot happens, just nothing to really care about. Compare that to The Acolyte, which cost $180 million, and nothing happens, and it's boring. So boom, there's one thing Rebel Moon does right, though it's not really saying much at all. My friends, I want to thank you for joining me here for this pondering special. If you would please like this video, smash that like button, and if you are new here and you want to see more of videos like this, please subscribe to the channel. Right there, go ahead, click that little button. My friends, until next time, create, innovate, and inspire. May the Force be with you. And for the love of God, go ahead and cancel Disney+. Goodbye, boo-boo.